We are so honored to be hosting Patricia Skalka on day 4,402 of Boswell Being in Business. Her latest Dave Cubiak mystery is Death Washes Ashore. And tonight we are very honored for Skalka to be in conversation with Barry Wightman. The new book has won raves, including Library Journal, where Lisa Holston of an Indiana library wrote, "The sequel to Death by the Bay is a descriptive mystery with a strong sense of place. Readers who enjoy well-plotted, atmospheric stories featuring small-town sheriffs, such as Victoria Houston's Loon Lake Mysteries, will enjoy this book." Patricia Skalka is the author of the other books in the series. She's been also a staff writer for Reader's Digest. She's the president, or has been the president. I never know how up to date our introductions are sometimes. President of Sisters in Crime of Chicagoland and a member of the Authors Guild of America, Mystery Writers America, and Society of Midlands Author. I just want to say, I don't know if Milwaukee's in Chicagoland, so she may or may not still be the president. I think I'll be corrected on this if she isn't. Barry Wightman is the author of Pepperland, winner of a Silver Ippy from the Independent Publishers Association. Wightman is president of the Wisconsin Writers Association and past program chair of the Southeast Wisconsin Festival of Books. Thank you both for coming. Welcome to Boswell's virtual ether.
Well, it's great to be here, and thanks for the lovely introductions, Daniel, and all the great stuff that Boswell does. It's just a treasure. I tell you, Boswell Books is a treasure in Milwaukee and all of Wisconsin. So what would we do without it, I ask you? But thanks for being here, everybody. Thanks for coming, and you know, all this Zoom stuff. It's so easy just to show up. You don't have to drive anywhere. It's just great. Anyway, I am very pleased to be here with Patricia Skalka. And you know what? She and I have been talking for a while, and the book that has just come out, Death Washes Ashore. That's the 6th one, number 6 in the Dave Cubiak mystery series. That's a big deal. Congratulations, Patricia. That is so cool. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And if you got questions on any of that kind of stuff, writerly stuff for Patricia, you know, stick it in the chat, and we'll get to it as we go. But we thought that we would kick things off with Patricia reading the opening scene in the new book, which is pretty cool. So, Patricia, I turn it over to you.
Oh, thank you, Barry, and thank you, Daniel. And oh, by the way, I am a member of Sisters in Crime of Wisconsin, as well as a member of Sisters in Crime Chicagoland and the past president of that chapter. And I am a member of the Wisconsin Writers Association, which is a fantastic group that I just found out has 500 members, which is pretty cool too. So thank you all for being here. I am going to read, as Barry said, the opening from Death Washes Ashore. Chapter 1, Storm Damage. A noise pierced the pre-dawn silence, and Dave Cubiak woke with a start. In the eerie half-light, nothing looked familiar. The room was oddly shaped, and he didn't recognize either the bed he lay in or the thin cotton blanket that was draped over his legs and chest. Mostly, it was the stillness that seemed out of place. A powerful storm system had stalled over Door County, and for 36 hours, howling winds and slashing rain had torn at the very soul of the peninsula. But that morning, the world was submerged in a soft quiet. Listening to the stillness, the sheriff realized that the tempest had passed and that he was in the guest room of his own house, unshaven and fully clothed in the same pants and shirt he had on the day before. He had come in around midnight from a grueling day, and rather than disturb his family, he had headed to the back room and immediately fallen asleep. The noise came again. It was the squeak of the door being pushed farther open, the pit-pat of light footfalls headed toward the bed. Dad? Kubiak's 8-year-old son, Joey, materialized in the pale ribbon of light along the edge of the window shade. The boy was dressed in his favorite red t-shirt and pajama pants that were inexplicably decorated with rockets and fish. With Bear, their young black lab, at his side, he approached. Dad? The sheriff was parched, exhausted. He wanted water. He needed more sleep. But as his son neared, he pushed up on his elbow. What are you doing up so early? What's wrong? He asked. There's something weird out on the sand. Joey's eyes were heavy with sleep, but he spoke with unusual urgency. The lake's been churning up a lot of stuff because of the storm. Kubiak kept his voice low, hoping not to rouse Kate, who was in their room across the hall. I know. The boy perched on the edge of the futon and searched for his father's calloused palm. His skin was smooth, but no longer baby soft. This is different. Kubiak pulled him close. I told you not to go outside. It could be dangerous. I didn't go anywhere. I just peeked. I couldn't sleep. You gotta come look, please. Tugging his father's hand, Joey slipped to his feet. I think there's a body on the beach, he said. There you go. That's how it opens.
That's pretty cool. You know, in the reviews of your books, there's a word that keeps popping up, a bunch of them different actually, but atmospheric. You capture the sense of place so well, and so many folks of us around here, you know, have long histories with Door County, and you know, I wanted to talk to you about where did it all come from? What's the seed, the origin of the Dave Cubiak mysteries?
The Dave Cubiak mysteries themselves came from Door County. I was there one day sitting on the beach, beautiful sunny day, absolutely gorgeous, sitting in the same spot at night, just like sitting in an ink bottle. There was heavy cloud cover, no stars, no nothing. You know, you put your hand in front of your face, you couldn't see it. And it made me think of the contrast, you know, here's light and dark, good and evil. So I got the idea for a story about a place with a picture perfect veneer and sinister forces at work beneath it. So that was the genesis for the first book. And each book along the way had, you know, a specific, it was the setting or the characters or the plot or something that got me, you know, got my mind kind of twirling around a story. Death Washes Ashore, interestingly, came from two things were presented to me. The same thing happened with Death Rides the Ferry. But Death Washes Ashore, I have a neighbor who's, you know, down the beach from me, and there was a huge storm. And he sent me an email and he said, oh yeah, you know, really bad news up here, and the shore's been ripped apart, and this boat ended up on the shore, flipped upside down. And he said, wouldn't it be funny if there was a body under it? And I sort of thought, yeah, right, haha. And I said, I can't use that. But it wouldn't go away, you know, it kept staying with me. Okay, a boat washes up and there's this body. That's, you know, it's a nice idea, it's a nice image for a mystery writer, but it's not enough for a story. So it's, you know, whose body? I feel like Dorothy Sayers' Whose Body was one of her books. Why is it there? How did it get there? Why would someone be out in this boat during this horrendous storm? All of those kinds of things had to be, you know, figured out. And if there was nothing behind it, there'd be no story. And then I happened to be talking to my younger daughter, Carla. She was telling me about this kind of activity called live action role playing, which is, you know, if you know Civil War reenactments where people are in costume and they reenact scenes of different battles. Well, LARPing, which is this live action role playing, is where people get together and either do a scripted kind of performance or activity where it can be fantasy, it can be, you know, frontiersmen. A lot of it is medieval. So as soon as I started hearing about that, I'm thinking, oh, okay. And then, you know, so I'm thinking King Arthur, Knights of the Round Table, and then I thought of Camelot. And I thought, I'm writing books set in Door County. Why can't we have a Door Camelot? And once I had Camelot in my head, that was it. So suddenly I knew whose body that was going to be, or, I had part of the story. The pieces started to come together. And that's really what this business of writing a mystery is all about. It's getting all of these pieces and getting them to fit together and make sense and make a picture. So it's like you put the puzzle together so you understand it. At least this is the way I work. I have to see this picture, know the story, and then I have to take it all apart and present it to the reader piece by piece by piece until they can put it all together and the book is finished and done and the mystery solved.
Well, you said something that I thought was fascinating, that it's the juxtaposition of this idyllic place, Door County, with sinister happenings, which is, that can either be a cozy situation or not. And so that makes me think about Dave. And where did Dave come from? As he's gone in your series, he's aged, he's getting a little older, more experienced. So how does he change?
Yes. Well, Dave came from the fact that in the first book, when I started thinking about these sinister forces, I wanted them to kind of snake back through time, through the history of Door County, through people's lives, going back to a time when someone did something wrong or hurt somebody, where there were these old grudges, and I needed suspects, people who had a reason to want to do these evil things or these kind of really negative things. And eventually somebody's out there killing people. So they had to have a reason for wanting to do that. And Door County, and that comes out in this book, is the kind of place where a lot of people have been there for generations. They know each other. They know everybody's history. And I needed a protagonist who didn't know any of that. I needed somebody who was like brand new to Door County, didn't know the animosities, the grudges, the anything, had to figure the thing out. So as I was plotting out the first book, there's Kubiak. He's like standing in the corner looking at me. And I knew Chicago cops. I knew their stories, some of them, a bunch of them, and somehow that evolved into Kubiak. And then I had to give him a reason for being there. And so I saddled the poor man with a tragedy, a really somber kind of situation, gave him a backstory that wasn't so happy. He didn't have a happy childhood, and sent him on his way to Door County. And he doesn't want to be there. He's like the only person on the peninsula who wants to get out. That's how we meet him. And ends up solving the crime. And he's a former Chicago homicide cop, so he knows something's going on when people start dying. And I couldn't leave him in that place. He was so emotionally battered. The only way I could figure out to help him, move him along, was to move him through time. And originally, I was only going to write the one book. It was going to be a standalone. And then I started getting ideas. Well, I'll do 4. I'll do 1 a season. And then kind of kept growing from there. And I had to move him. If I'm moving him through time, everybody else is getting a little bit older. Circumstances are changing. And so that's how the whole series developed. And Kubiak starts reconnecting with life. He starts finding a new purpose. He starts healing, and that's the whole point of the whole series. Each of the books has, writers use these terms all the time, a story arc, which is essentially a beginning. It means a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. It has a passageway that it goes through. And so each book in the series is a standalone in the sense that you could read it and you'd get a complete story that has a beginning, a middle, and end. But the overriding story arc of the series is Kubiak's journey of personal redemption and healing. And that's how I envisioned it from the start. And that's kind of been my, what I see when I think of the series.
In this one, Dave is, he's quite a family guy. I mean, he's got the wife and his son, and feels guilty when he's not there, and he's missing this and missing that. And how has that changed over the series arc? Has he become more and more engaged? Is that a whole nother story line than in the past?
Well, in the one book, at first he's, in the first book, he's like really rude to this woman who he meets. He's attracted to her, but rude to her. And then, there are different little romantic kind of involvements, or hinted at anyway. And he does get married in the third book. By the third book, he's married. And in Death Rides the Ferry, in that one, he discovers, or his wife tells him that she's pregnant, and he is totally freaked out. He feels he just doesn't know if he can be a dad, if he can be a good parent. He feels responsible, for the fact that his first child died, and he didn't protect her. He wasn't there. And this is a very unsettling situation for him. He's very close to his friend Evelyn Bethard, who is the retired coroner, who becomes kind of like a father figure to Kubiak. And he kind of takes his problems, to Bethard and seeks his counsel. And Bethard has had his own tragedies. And so these two men kind of help each other and grow and move along. So yeah, Kubiak wrestles with these things. And that's all part of who he is. And I think one of the things that really, really surprised me in the writing of the whole series is how people relate to him. I had no idea that was going to happen. They see him in his struggles. They see themselves in him and his struggles. One man, he didn't say it, but I got the feeling he was a psychologist, because he worked with sailors over at Great Lakes. And he said he saw Kubiak's story as a story of hope, that people would be able to overcome trauma and move on with their lives. So readers see that or feel that, and they kind of cheer him on. I get emails from people who are telling me how much how much they can relate to him. So it's been an interesting experience for me from that perspective.
Well, you're so good at being inside his head. We're with him all the time, because that's just the way the strategy. And so we see what he's thinking and what is from his point of view, and that's really a strength of the book, and that's why people, I think, really relate to him and just relate to him. Say, oh my gosh, can you imagine what he's going through? So that's pretty powerful.
Well, thank you. And I really owe a lot of that to 20 years of writing human interest stories for the Reader's Digest and other publications, because I sat in people's, sat in their living rooms, sat in their kitchens, listened to them pour their hearts out and relate to me experiences that they'd been through, many of them life-threatening, many of them life-changing. And oftentimes they couldn't articulate it. They'd been through a horrible experience, but all they could say was, it was horrible, or it was frightening, or I didn't know what to do. And I would have to try and get myself in their heads and say, well, was it like X? Or did you feel this? So that I would have something to work with in terms of telling their story. And I think I just learned that. I remember talking to one woman who had jumped into an abandoned well to save her child. There was some water in there. So she's in there treading water and holding up her 18-month-old son and sending her 4-year-old son to run to the next farm to get help. And all she was able to tell me was that it was, and I thought, well, I need more than scary. So I put myself, and I'm thinking, I'm in this well, you're in the middle of Indiana, maybe it was Southern Illinois. And I remember I looked at her and I said, are there snakes down there? She almost flew out of her chair. That was what she was afraid of. She was afraid of snakes, but it was all part of the experience in her head, and she couldn't separate that out. So I was trying to figure out what I would feel if I were that woman in that situation. And I think that just kind of carries over to the books.
Well, I think so. I mean, you're a reporter. That's where you honed your craft. You're a nonfiction, if you go that way, and so that that is fabulous in understanding people and going down to different layers and understanding what makes them tick. And that's what you just did. Yeah. Yeah. So
that's what I do. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. What you know, the sense of place is so vivid, and people just love the heck out of that. Because if you go to Door County, you're going to look at the little map in the front of the book and say, oh yeah, I know what that is. And that is powerful stuff. So it's a character. It is a character of the book, in the series.
Well, first of all, hats off to my daughter, Julia Podvoiskas, who does all of the maps. She's done every single one of them. And, you know, always a nice little touch. They're each one's a little bit different, because I like to read books with maps. And so she does it. And I have gotten comments from people who are familiar with Door County. They say, yeah, I can just picture it. And people who've never been there say, oh, yeah, I look at the map and then I read it. And then I can just imagine all of this. But, you know, it's not hard to make this place sound great, because how can you miss, with 300 miles of shoreline and huge expanses of, you know, trees and picturesque little villages and artists and farmers and shipbuilders. I mean, these huge freighters come in. It's such a wonderful mix of different things, and they're all there, and they all exist side by side, and it's just a marvel. And I think in writing about the place, what I try to do, first of all, I think if you just glomp a big bunch of it in a book anywhere, it just stops the action, you know, and weighs it down. So you have little tidbits here and there, a description of this, a description of that, and kind of carries the reader through. But the other thing I think is almost taking a minimalist approach, you know, rather than great elaborate descriptions, just kind of simple, because the place is magnificent and it kind of sells itself. You know, it's hard to miss in describing it.
Yeah. Well, I've got a little paragraph here that I just think is great, and it's on this very subject. I'm a Lake Michigan guy on the other side, and so I feel the love and the respect for that lake. But here's a great little paragraph. The lake came up suddenly. After the miles of thick forest he had gone through, the unfettered expanse of water was shocking. All that beautiful, vivid blue, the color of hope. That's just great. That's great. And that's right. You come through the woods, boom, there's the lake.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I come to that lake and I look at it and I find it very humbling, because I think of all of the thousands, tens of thousands of people who've come to that lake before me, who've walked along those shores, and it's just always there. And, you know, I learned something. I do a lot of research for the books, different kinds of research, and I learned a really fascinating bit of information when I was researching the very first book. I still can't figure out how anybody knows this, but according to the experts, there is glacial water in Lake Michigan. That blew me away.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. And I use that in the book. So doing research, you know, people say, write what you know. Write what you find out, what you're willing to learn about. And then you have all this interesting stuff that you can bring to the book, like with LARPing. I didn't know anything about LARPing. I had to research it and do a lot of reading and talk to people who've done some of these things and get a feel for it. And then you can write about it.
So tell us about the LARPing thing. I know you, tell us about that.
Well,
read a bit out of the book.
I have a section in the book about LARPing. So remember, we have Door Camelot. Kubiak goes to this center called Door Camelot, and he was nearly to the house when the yellow door flew open and a tall young man strode across the porch and bounded down the wide wooden stairs. He had a powerful build, pale skin, and dark hair that flowed past his shoulders. The rest of his appearance was equally affected. Black boots that came up over his knees, tucked in black pants, and a white linen shirt with a round collar and long billowy sleeves. "Greetings, sire. How are you on this fine day?" he called out as the Kubiak approached. Kubiak almost turned around to see whom the young man was addressing. "What business have you here today, if I may be so bold as to inquire?" the greeter went on. By now he had reached Kubiak and saluted him with a half bow. The sheriff showed his badge. "I'm here to see Scott Henley." "Alas, sire, Master Henley is absent from the grounds today." Kubiak had had enough of the pretense. "You can ditch the routine and fast forward a few centuries if you don't mind. Where is he?" So then they have a little chat about what was Scott and all that sort of thing. And then Kubiak says, "Who else is here?" And the young man says, "The rest of the troop." "Well, those who didn't take off when we heard the storm prediction. Earlier in the week, there were 13, including Scott. Now we're down to 5. "A troop? You're actors then?" Kubiak asked. Travis grinned and looked even younger than he had first appeared. "Not really, though there are some who like to think of themselves as fledgling thespians. What we do here is called live action role playing." "LARPing," Kubiak said. The greeter's eyebrows arched in surprise. "Hey, you've heard of it. I'm impressed. The movement is still fairly new in the hinterland." "And what's the reaction you generally get out here in the hinterland when you mention LARPing?" Oblivious to the hint of sarcasm in the sheriff's question, Travis went on cheerfully. "Most people have no idea what I'm talking about, and those who do generally consider it silly fantasy play. They view LARPers as adults in costume acting like kids. Maybe on the surface that's what it looks like, but it goes much deeper." Travis studied Kubiak. "You carry a gun and a badge, Sheriff. Every day you go to work, there's always the chance for adventure." Kubiak shrugged. "Actually, most of my job is rather mundane." "Even so, there's always the possibility of something different, something unexpected, a challenge, if you will, the opportunity to use your wits to try to outmaneuver the bad guys. You get to think. Do you know what a luxury that is? For most people, it's the same boring stuff day after day. For them, LARPing is the key to adventure, to something different. It's a way to escape the mundane routine of everyday, ordinary existence. Sure, we have our comforts, and I'm not saying anyone wants to give that up, but historically, people face life and death challenges all the time. Explorers, pioneers, soldiers, it's in our genes. But what do? We concoct fancy coffee drinks. We stock shelves with cereal boxes or make widgets. We sit in front of computer screens and let machines do our work. How tedious is that? LARPing is a harmless way to be someone else, someone brave or powerful. It's all a game, but maybe in its own way, it's a little like therapy, a cure for the ennui of modern life. So that's LARPing.
That's pretty cool. The ennui of modern life.
Yeah.
And that just interweaves beautifully with, Dave is, he's dealing with death all the time. Well, maybe not all the time up there, but I don't know, maybe there's a lot of death and murders up there, but he's dealing with it. And so the real and the play acting. Yeah, wow.
What I realized, and I didn't realize this till after I'd written the whole book, I was thinking about it, but one of the themes, the books all have, they each have like a separate theme. And really one of the themes of this book, and it's not just the people who are involved in LARPing, is the notion that we have a sense of who we are and who we wish we were, or what we are and what we kind of thought we'd be, or, had dreamed of being at one point in time, and maybe it didn't quite work out. And I thought about it, and I thought almost every single person in this book has that experience to some extent or another. It's just woven through. And I thought, that's really kind of a little bit like what life is all about. we have an image of ourselves maybe doing something that is very different than what we do in real life. And
So was that part of the original plan? Okay, that's gonna be part of my thinking. That was a surprise.
no, that was a surprise. No, absolutely not. And that's one of the wonderful things about when you write, all these surprises kind of pop up. I mentioned the surprise about how people have related to Kubiak, and one of the other surprises for me was how the relationships between the characters have developed. That Kubiak has developed almost a son-to-father relationship with Evelyn Bethard, the retired coroner. And then I introduced a young hotshot kind of deputy in the second book, Mike Rao. And he had one purpose in the book, and that was to provide the sheriff with a fast boat. And then in this third book, he takes on a much, much larger and a more important role. And kind of what you see happening is almost a son to father relationship happening from him to Kubiak. And I didn't plan any of that. These things just kind of happen. The characters do grow and take on kind of lives of their own, and these kinds of things just develop this. The interesting thing is that there's a really kind of emotionally difficult scene in the third book where Rao has the larger role, and Kubiak says to him, "Are you okay, son?" And he says it, as a man, an older man would say to a younger man, but also as a father would say to his child. Mm. And when I was writing it, I was writing Kubiak saying, "Are you okay?" And then somehow the word son just happened. It just came out that way. And I thought, yes, that's what the man would say.
And that's the right word. I mean, one word can make a huge difference in just the angle or the meaning. And the character.
Yeah. And then in another book, I had where Kubiak is being challenged. This is in the first book. He's being challenged to participate and to help. And he won't. He's just refusing. I don't have anything to offer. It's not my problem. It's your problem. It's not my business. And he storms out of this meeting. And I was going to have him kind of going through this angst, arguing with himself. But instead, Evelyn Bethard follows him out the door. And he's the one who challenges Kubiak. So instead of having this internal dialogue, he's got someone confronting him and saying, "We need you. You've got to help."
Yeah.
And so they have this back and forth. And it's just kind of cool the way that happens.
Yeah. Well, another thing I really admire is the pacing. Every chapter transition is, carefully constructed so that you get to the end of the chapter, you go, well, and then you got to go to the next one. It just, you're very good at that, Patricia. And I think the best transition is between chapters 18 and 19. That's all I'm going to say. But it's good. It's outstanding because it's just so.
You're going to go look and see what it is. But
that's on page 136 and 137.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I do, though, is when I work on the books. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know.
You better not.
Yeah, I won't. But actually, when I plot out my books ahead of time, there are people who write from the seat of their pants. They get the idea of like, okay, a body is under a boat, washes up on the shore.
Then it goes.
Yeah, and they write a marvelous, they would absolutely fantastic. I can't work that way because half my brain would be thinking, well, what's going to happen next? Who did it? And I would be so distracted by that. I wouldn't be able to focus on what I was, on the writing. So I do beginning to end, step by step, every single thing that happens. And I don't think in terms of chapters. I just think in terms of the action. This, then this, then this, then this, then this. And it's not till I have the whole thing done like that. And we're talking 22 pages of single-spaced bullet points going down the page. Double space between the bullet points, but The whole book is laid out. And only then do I allow myself the luxury of going back and saying, which would be chapter 1, and which would be chapter 2. And there are very natural breaks that just come in the course of the story moving along.
Yeah.
I used to, when I first started this, which is why the first book took forever because I was doing everything wrong, but I was used to think in terms of chapters. And that was just too, the blinders were like this. It was too narrow. And the very first time I used this other technique of going point by point by point, I had 22 pages of my, we'll call it outline or beat line. And when I divided it into chapters, I had 22 chapters. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. And so ever since it just, if you have a story, if you develop a story and you think about it, this is for all the writers out there, you have to have faith in your story. And if you have faith in your story, you sit down and you write it and you got it. And that doesn't mean it's finished with the first draft, but you're well on your way. And that's when you start working on it and editing it and revising it. You can't revise anything until you've got a rough draft. So the other thing is that what I've learned, I used to struggle to make that first, when I got to the writing of it, the first chapter, you're told the first chapter is so important. The first 5 pages are so important. You can really, really get stuck on trying to make that first chapter or those first 5 pages just absolutely magnificent. And then you never get much further than that because you just get stuck on it. And I firmly believe, and maybe again, this is just the way I work and this is just what happens for me, each book has kind of a life of its own, a feeling of its own, a rhythm of its own, a sense of where it's going. And you don't really tap into that until at least I don't really get that until I'm maybe a quarter of the way into it.
Yeah.
So then the writing, even the first draft, the writing just gets better and smoother because it kind of gets imbued with a sense of what it's supposed to be. Then I go back when I'm ready to edit the whole thing. I can go back to the beginning and that really rough stuff that just is barely hanging together, it starts coming together because I now have this sense of what this book is all about.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
Right now I'm working on the next one. I have all the stuff printed out because I have to work when I edit. I edit on hard copy. I don't even have chapter 1 printed out yet because my rough chapter 1 is really bad and it needs something and I don't know what yet, but it's coming to me.
Yeah.
And the story will present itself. It'll come to me. That's what I mean about having faith in your story.
Yeah.
Don't beat it to death trying to find it. It'll come to you.
So talk about your influences, your favorite writers. I mean, who's cool, who's great, who's indispensable?
Okay. Indispensable, I would say, is Donna Tartt. I really like her stuff. And Kate Atkinson in her Jackson Brody mystery. I loved her Jackson Brody characters, her mysteries. The writer that really influenced me when I was much younger was Dorothy Sayers. And I remember just, because I read Nancy Drew, I read Sherlock Holmes, I read Agatha Christie, I loved Poirot. But it was Dorothy Sayers and her Lord Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane that really clicked with me that you can write a mystery that also is a window into human character. It's not just a whodunit. It's what makes these people tick. Who are they as human beings? What are their values? And that was very important to me. So that's kind of what I wanted to do. There are Jess Walter. He's kind of a new guy. Well, he's been around for a few years, but he sets his books in Spokane. I mean, who's got mysteries set in Spokane? And they're marvelous. I've only read one, but I loved it. And so other contemporary authors in terms of mysteries, well, Nick Petrie, you know, our very own Milwaukee, Erica Ruth Newbar in terms of historical fiction, which I love, Sarah Paretsky. I am really, really looking forward to reading. We talked earlier about Susanna Calkins and her two historical mysteries, her historical fiction mysteries. And Lori Rader Day has one coming out in the fall, Death at Greenway, which is set at Agatha Christie's home. I can't wait to read that. So I read, when I'm writing, I don't read mysteries. When I'm writing a mystery, I don't read mysteries because I want my ideas. So I tend to veer off into more literary kinds of stuff. And then when I'm finished with the book, then I jump back into reading some mysteries. But I like, for setting, you talk about setting, Alan First and all of his World War II books, they're really marvelous. I remember one scene in one dark, smoky bar, and they're drinking shots of vodka, and they're throwing them down like Russians. Well, I mean, you see it immediately. You know how Russians drink their vodka.
Throwing them down like Russians. Yeah.
Yeah. You don't need any more than that.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I like to read a variety of people, and being in a book club is marvelous. I'm in 2 book clubs, so everybody chooses, you know, different books are chosen by the participants in the one, and in the other is the Boswell book club, and Daniel picks them, or his staff, you know, recommends them. So you're and being in book clubs, you read things you might not necessarily pick out or even know about, and it's a wonderful exposure and a way to really kind of broaden your mind. And I think reading is it's like nutrition for the brain. You know, it's like you eat food to keep your body going. You have to, if you're a writer, you have to read to feed your mind in a sense. So yeah, all kinds of books.
Do you ever read any poetry?
Some. I like poetry, but I don't read enough of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I would like to read more. And that's the one thing about Wisconsin Writers Association, when you guys do the open mics, there are always people reading poems, and I'm blown away by them.
They're great, yeah.
Good. You know, and it makes me realize, you talk about the importance of individual words. That's through loud and clear in poetry. But yeah, Mary Oliver is, you know, I really like her stuff too. And actually, Walt Whitman and Tennyson. I mean, I think it's on my list. Read more poetry. You know,
read more poetry. I think any writer of fiction can really benefit from, you know, getting a good dose of it and a feel for it, because the words, the imagery is so condensed and powerful, and you know, who knows what you're going to pick up and borrow or steal. Great writers, you know, we steal if we can and make it our own.
Yeah, you got to make it your own. Yeah, you have to make it your own. You can't just pick it up.
No, but the notion, the idea, it takes you in a different place, and that's where we got to go.
Yeah. So.
Well, I think, you know, we're at the point where maybe we should take some questions. We have a handful out there, and here I'll read the first one. We've read the first 5. Here's a fan, and trying to remember Dave's backstory about his first wife and child, and she's not clear, or the writer here is not clear about how did they die. Was it in a shooting or what? So yeah,
Dave was supposed to come home, and they were going to go to Great America. He lived in Chicago at the time. He worked for the force. He'd had a fight with his wife, an argument. He was jealous about something. It was his own stubbornness. So he took an extra task. You know, there was a big thing going on at work, and he decided that he, you know, he kind of volunteered to stay extra. So he didn't come home to take them to Great America the way he had promised his daughter. And so the wife and the daughter were walking to the neighborhood ice cream shop, and they were run down by a drunk driver. They just died in the street. And they died in his arms. You know, he got back that, you know, his colleagues came and got him. He was on a stakeout, and they pulled him out of his car and said, "You've got trouble at home." And he went and found his wife and his daughter lying in pools of blood on the street. And it just, I mean, he just went off the deep end. So
that changes a person.
Yeah.
And forever, it's always there, that vision. So how does Dave, you've talked about this, how does he cope?
Well, he doesn't cope very well.
No.
He drinks himself out of his job, and he has he has this Eastern European Polish tradition of drinking. Alcohol kind of runs in the family. His father was an alcoholic, so that's what came easily. That's how you solved your problems. You drowned your sorrows in a shot and a beer. And he was just a down and out alcoholic. And he was at one point just under a viaduct. He wasn't homeless, but he was under a viaduct, just, you know, worn out and whatever. And his former partner dragged him home and basically locked him in a room and said, you know, "They're watching you." His former partner was this really, you know, very strong religious man. And he said, you know, "You can't do this. You can't do this to them. You're hurting them." And straightened Dave out, got him turned around on the straight and narrow. And he's the one who pointed him to Door County. He said, "Didn't you go there when you were a kid? Weren't you a Boy Scout up there or something?" And Dave goes back to school. He retrains as a forest ranger. And that's how he gets the job. He's not a cop or a sheriff or anything, a lawman, when he goes to Door County. He's working in the state park. And it's only after he solves this sort of horrendous series of murders that he becomes elected sheriff. But he was, he just signed out of life. He withdrew from people. He was drinking all the time.
Isn't it great how, you know, we're talking about him like he's real? I mean, it's a real person, and he is. I mean, he's living in our heads. He's living in your head, and that is part of the magic of fiction, what you do, and that's a fabulous thing. I got a question here from somebody. Well, Flora Fuller. She asks, "Do you have a preference between Bayside or lakeside?"
Preference. It depends. I mean, I like the Bayside for the charm, for the, you know, some of the shops and the villages and the calmer waters and the warmer water. But my heart belongs to the lakeside, the rough and tumble and the waves crashing in and the long stretches of beaches that you can walk down. So I stick with the quiet side, which is what the lakeside is called up there.
Yeah, that lake, I mean, you know, outsiders who've never been to any of the Great Lakes, particularly Michigan or Superior, they think, it's just a lake. And that thing, it's an ocean.
It's an inland sea, yeah. Water sea, yeah.
It can be like a pond in the morning, and by afternoon, it's raging, and oh my gosh.
Yeah. So.
Here's a comment from a good friend, Nancy Riffall. She says, "A poetry anthology about Door County fairly is halfway to the North Pole, published by the Door County Poets Collective, and it's out there, available through the Right On Door County website."
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Daniel, contact her if you want copies in the store. More Door County stuff.
Wonderful. Oh, and Right On Door County is a marvelous resource up there too. I mean, they've just grown and grown and grown. So yeah, absolutely. I'll have to look into that book because
it's
read more poetry.
Read more poetry. Somebody, Nancy also asks, when did you write the book? Was there even a whiff of the pandemic at the time?
You know, this book helped me writing this book. I wrote this book, when did I finish it? It was finished It was finished before the pandemic. No, part of it was written during the pandemic. And then I started writing the next one too during the pandemic. So writing fiction, writing about death washing ashore, actually was a marvelous, it helped me survive the pandemic because it was an escape. Every day, I could sit down in front of my computer with a notebook in my lap or something and a pen, and for 3 or 4 hours every single day that I wanted to, I escaped the whole world of, masks and viruses and everything that we were all dealing with all the rest of the time. And I lived in my own little world. So that was why I was sort of like LARPing without a costume, living in another place, creating another situation, creating a different life, a life for these other people. So I wrote it. I started it before the pandemic. There's no mention of the pandemic in it because it didn't fit. In the book I'm working on now, I reference the pandemic as being over, that tourists are back and, we don't have to worry about all these things that we had to worry about before. But I that's a question that comes up when writers get together. Are you going to write a pandemic book? And my feeling is that those have all been written. And then in another 10 years, a whole bunch more of them will be written kind of in retrospect. But no, that doesn't appeal to me to do that. So it wasn't part of this book.
Yeah. There's going to be an avalanche of stuff like that, and it'll go on forever. And I don't know, hard to know. Somebody wants to know about a little writerly stuff about finding agents and publishers and things like that. That might be beyond the scope of the evening, but writers are always asking, always wondering about how to get published. Any other questions, folks? You got, now's the time. We're almost at the end of the hour. If you got something burning about the book, let me know. Put it out there. Suddenly we have a few here.
Oh, we do, okay.
Jeannie asks, just before I tuned in, I was reading the first book. At first I thought I had ruined it by listening to the beginning of the latest book. Now I can't wait to read more and to see how his life continues. Okay, that's a good comment. That's good. Yeah.
Okay, can I just, to the person who wanted to know about agents and publishing,
yeah.
One of the best things you can do is go to writers' conferences or join a writers' organization, because there are sessions and talks on those topics. And I mean, it varies, right? I can't go into, we don't have time, but it's, you go to where writers are, and they're always talking about it, and people have suggestions and leads. And if there's a conference, there's always a session, an agent panel. There are local publishers, or there's go to writers organizations. Chicago Writers Association publishes a list of independent publishers in the Midwest area. I mean, there are sources for these kinds of things. So that information is available.
Yeah, and check out Wisconsin Writers Association, wiwrites.org. And we just had an event a week ago on Saturday the 10th, and it was all about, okay, now you've written that thing, now what? Getting the agent, getting the figuring out your publishing strategy and all that. So yeah, Patricia's right. There are lots of resources out there for us writers. It's part of the thing. We are sentenced to it. We are sentenced to this life of writing. It's a life sentence. Something. I don't know.
Yeah, right. It's hard to escape.
Yep, hard to escape. So anyway, this has been wonderful talking with you, Patricia. Thanks so much. It's very fun and a great book. And folks out there, if you haven't bought it, buy it, and you'll whip through it, and you'll have a great time. And it's marvelous writing.
I hope you all get to read the book. the new book, Death Washes Ashore. We're starting at the beginning. I have jumped into the series of various places, and I will tell you, though, Dave has an arc, a growth arc. You do not have to read the books in order. Right? So, because if you did, they'd probably number them or something like that. So, thank you, Barry, for an amazing job. I hope everyone who is a writer knows to join the Wisconsin Writers Association. Patricia, thank you so much for a wonderful series. And if nothing else, it makes me someday want to go up to travel to Door County again. So I can do it for you both. For now.
I'll give you a grand tour, Daniel. I can't believe you've been there. Thank you, and thank you for this opportunity. You've always been just wonderful and supportive, and I've enjoyed coming to the store and doing things in person, but this has been fun too.
They are fun. You get to see a little insider thing, and we're grateful to host you. So thank you again. And we're also grateful that all of you came to our virtual event series. We would not have a bookstore without you. So hope to see you at another event. Good night, everyone.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.